Today is an important day for me personally, as I am sitting in my family home, a place full of precious memories and walls which contain tale of olden the days. The cat is there too, energetic as ever. Heaven forbid he would sit and be bored whilst we find our feet, charging around the room like a lunatic with his incessant gusto and infectious glee that I cannot help but partake in. It was this house, the heart of my family's inheritance, in which one day a middle-class car dealer realized his dream and made it into an incredible $6 million estate. It is a testament to his years of work and a legacy he left behind for me upon dying. Now, in his absence, my husband is keen to claim a share of this inheritance, arguing that it should belong to both of us. However, I am armed with documents that clearly state my sole ownership. My name is Marilyn, 40 years old, and I am deeply immersed in the digital realm thanks to my career at an online bank, a path that echoes the financial principles my parents instilled in me. They taught me the value of money management and the importance of financial responsibility, lessons that guide me to this day. Despite growing up in affluence, my parents ensured I lived a grounded life. My upbringing was not marked by lavishness, my allowance was modest, our meals were simple, and my education was in a public school, contrary to what one might expect from someone of my financial standing. Yet rumors of our wealth painted a different picture, leading many to believe my life was a parade of luxury and leisure. Marilyn, with your grand house and wealth, life must be a breeze, right? You must have all the latest gadgets and games. Can we come over and play? Were common queries from peers who envisioned a life for me that was far from reality. I didn't possess the latest toys or gaming consoles, yet the assumption was otherwise. It seemed like many wanted to befriend me for the perceived perks of my lifestyle. Today, as I stand in this house, surrounded by both the tangible and intangible pieces of my heritage, I am reminded of the true richness of my life, rooted not in material wealth, but in the values and memories that shape who I am. Coming from a family with financial means, I often found myself in uncomfortable situations where friends and acquaintances would ask me for money. It made me uneasy as I felt it contradicted the values of self-reliance and discretion that my parents had instilled in me. This discomfort escalated when I found myself in a dilemma after accidentally breaking Emma's gaming console. At the time, I had no money to replace it, which worsened the situation. Around the same period, Barbara, a new classmate, became a part of my life. She inquired whether I had informed my parents about the incident with the console, but fear of disappointing them kept me silent. I can't tell them. They might get upset, I confessed to Barbara, hoping for her understanding. Regrettably, when she asked me for financial help, I had to decline due to my parents' strict rule against lending money. Apologizing to Barbara was hard, and it made our school interactions awkward. Things took a turn for the worse when Barbara tearfully reacted to my refusal, and soon enough, rumors started circulating that I was unwilling to help a friend despite my family's wealth. Attempts to clarify that I had no spare money were futile. Emma then made a hurtful comment, implying that I valued money over friendship. The situation deteriorated further when Emma and Barbara began spreading falsehoods that I owed them money and was refusing to compensate for the broken console. The school eventually intervened and learned the truth, reprimanding Emma and Barbara. However, the rumors continued to spiral, eventually reaching my parents. My father stepped in, arranging a meeting with both families. Despite their apologies, The damage to our relationship was irreparable, and I chose to distance myself from Emma and Barbara. Despite this resolution, I still had to endure their cold stares and whispered comments. The whole ordeal was a painful lesson in trust and the complexities of friendship when mixed with money. That evening at dinner, my dad offered some advice that has resonated with me over the years. He emphasized the importance of being firm in our decisions, especially when it comes to financial matters. "Marilyn, it's perfectly fine to say no," he advised, his tone warm and reassuring. He also suggested a practical approach for handling persistent inquiries about money. If someone keeps asking, just tell them you need to check with your parents, even if you already know you can't lend the money. This wisdom on managing money issues with grace and assertiveness became a cornerstone of my growth. As I matured, I became more selective about the people I allowed into my inner circle, prioritizing character over financial considerations. Post-university, I was keen to keep my professional and personal lives distinct to avoid financial entanglements. These experiences underscored the value of setting clear boundaries in friendships and finances alike, shaping the person I became. By the time I was 32, I met Scott through a mutual friend. Despite our age difference, his authenticity and warmth were immediately appealing. What started as casual dating soon blossomed into a serious relationship. 3 years later, we celebrated our union with a beautiful wedding, much to my parents' delight. About a month into our marriage, my father suggested inviting Scott over to our place. I had some reservations. Scott was a talkative person, and I feared he might unwittingly divulge sensitive family information. Nevertheless, feeling more secure in our relationship, I decided it was time to introduce him more fully to my family's world. During the visit, Scott was visibly impressed by my family's home, revealing that he hadn't fully grasped the extent of our wealth. While the visit itself went smoothly, Scott's relentless questions about our financial status during our drive home made me uncomfortable, particularly because I wasn't very familiar with the specifics of our family finances myself. A few months later, the situation took a dramatic turn when my mother called to inform me that my father had been hospitalized, an event that came as a shock and added another layer of complexity to our lives. It was a shock to discover that my dad was unwell, especially since I hadn't been aware of any health issues. Reflecting on our last meeting, I remembered noticing that he seemed under the weather, and now guilt and worry overwhelmed me. When my mom and I visited him in the hospital that Saturday, despite his efforts to stay upbeat, it was clear he was struggling. He even apologized for what he felt was a burden on us, which was just so typical of his kind-hearted nature. The doctor's news that he had advanced pancreatic cancer, which had spread too far for surgery, hit us hard. It was hard to grasp how someone as health-conscious as my dad could fall so ill. Throughout his diagnosis, he remained strong, focusing on our happiness rather than his suffering, which brought tears to all of our eyes. Due to hospital regulations, only immediate family could visit, which saddened him as he hoped to create more happy memories with friends at home. This reminded us all of the vibrant life he had envisioned for us. I promised him that I would keep our home a place of joy, even in his absence. This promise became a cornerstone of how I coped with the situation. To honor my dad, I decided to renovate our family home, giving me something positive to focus on during such a difficult period. Scott, always so caring, expressed concern about the extent of my involvement, unaware of the additional challenges I was facing. like issues with our family estate that I had yet to disclose to him. When Scott inquired about my dad's condition, I finally opened up about all the difficulties we were facing. It was a relief to share the burden as I juggled work, hospital visits, and the flood of emotions that came with them. However, tension arose when Scott began to question the financial implications of my dad's illness and the status of the family estate. He even suggested we seek legal advice to prepare for any eventuality concerning my mom, which stirred up painful memories for me. My dad had always had a trusted lawyer, and the thought of diving into legalities at such a time felt incredibly raw and complicated. Scott's cautious approach to finances began to create tension in our relationship. This tension escalated a few months later when my father sadly passed away after a valiant fight against his illness. As we navigated the challenging period that followed, discussions about inheritance began to emerge within my family. I inherited a substantial property, a mansion valued at $6 million, which only heightened Scott's curiosity and involvement. Despite my efforts to keep him at a distance from these discussions, his excitement about moving into the mansion and his persistent questions about financial details took me by surprise. I later discovered that he had spoken to my cousin at the funeral, who had offhandedly mentioned that it would be a waste for such a grand house to remain unoccupied. This remark only complicated matters further. Despite my attempts to make it clear to Scott that the inheritance was mine and not something to be shared, he seemed unwilling or unable to accept this. Our relationship grew increasingly strained. At my father's funeral, Scott was present but disengaged, not assisting with the memorial services or the subsequent legal matters. As we tried to settle back into daily life, Scott shocked me by claiming he had changed the ownership of the family home into his name, presenting legal documents as proof. This betrayal was not only a profound breach of trust, but also a clear disregard for the respect and boundaries within our relationship. Dealing with these inheritance issues exposed deeper problems in our marriage, forcing us to reevaluate our values, the trust between us, and the direction of our relationship. When Scott bluntly suggested that we could continue living as roommates in the house without much financial support from him, and even threatened divorce if I disagreed, I was devastated. The magnitude of his actions and proposals was overwhelming. I pleaded with him to reconsider what he was doing, hoping he would see the emotional and relational turmoil his actions had caused. When Scott made the unilateral decision to change the ownership of our family home without my consent, he claimed he had consulted a lawyer. This revelation escalated our issues to the point where divorce seemed inevitable. I felt utterly betrayed and isolated, compelled to distance myself from the life and home I had shared with Scott. I couldn't fathom why Scott would take such drastic measures. It seemed that his perspective on money had shifted dramatically, impacting his actions and our relationship negatively. The situation worsened the next day when Scott demanded the house keys, claiming ownership. His attempt to enter the house was thwarted by security, whom I provided with the legitimate ownership documents that affirmed the house was indeed mine, a gift from my father. Upon seeing the proof, Scott was taken aback. He had entrusted a man named Frank to handle the legalities of changing the ownership and had paid him $10,000. Unfortunately, it turned out to be a scam. Frank was nowhere to be found, ignoring all of Scott's attempts to contact him. Scott's frustration soon turned towards me. He accused me of overspending and questioned my understanding of inheritance laws. Despite Scott's attempts to mend our relationship and his suggestions to give our marriage another shot, the trust we once shared was irreparably damaged. I had to ask the security guard to escort him off the property, marking the end of a painful chapter in my life. In the months that followed, I had ample time to reflect on everything that had transpired. This period of introspection helped me understand just how crucial trust and honesty are in a relationship. The ordeal with Scott, filled with deceit and betrayal, taught me to guard against letting financial matters cloud my judgment. During the first memorial service for my dad at our family temple, Scott made an unexpected appearance. Since our divorce, his life had taken a downward turn. He was unemployed and facing financial difficulties. This encounter was a stark reminder of how drastically our lives had diverged since the split. Seeing Scott at my dad's memorial service brought a mix of emotions. The people he had trusted had clearly failed him, and he stood there looking visibly distressed and out of place during such a solemn event. His attempt to apologize, though tearful, unintentionally caused a stir among my relatives. Despite his emotional state, I found it necessary to ask him to leave, and security had to intervene to ensure it was done. This was not only a difficult moment, but also a turning point for me, reinforcing my desire to move forward and leave our shared past behind. I decided it was time to move out of my parents' home, a decision I had been considering for some time. I found a new place to live, severing ties with Scott completely. Meanwhile, Scott continued to visit the property, which my mom and I had transformed into a rental villa. This new venture allowed us to turn a family property into a source of joy and retreat for many visitors. On his part, Scott appeared to be making positive strides. He secured a new job and seemed dedicated to starting anew. Transforming our family home into a rental villa not only fulfilled my dad's vision, but also created a warm and inviting space for guests from various backgrounds. Known for its stunning views and beautiful garden, the villa quickly gained popularity. We hosted a range of events, from intimate weddings to large family gatherings. Working alongside my mom on this project brought us closer and filled us with joy. As the villa's success grew, we decided to enhance it further. We added a swimming pool, a cozy outdoor lounge, and a playful area for children. Each new addition made the villa even more appealing, turning it into a beloved destination for relaxation and celebration. Symbolizing a new chapter of growth and happiness for us, our dedication to ensuring that our guests had a fantastic experience at the villa paid off, as it quickly became a favorite destination for those seeking a peaceful retreat and memorable experiences. This project was more than just a business venture. It was about fulfilling my father's dream and creating cherished memories for everyone who visited. Taking care of the villa's garden brought me immense joy and satisfaction. Transforming our family home into a vibrant place where people could gather, have fun, and create lasting memories filled me with pride. I could almost sense my father's pride looking down on us, seeing his vision come to life. This venture not only realized his dream, but also provided us with financial stability and a newfound sense of freedom. Throughout this journey, I learned valuable lessons about trust, finance, and the strength required to carve out my path independent of past challenges. This process of self-discovery taught me that facing difficulties can strengthen and motivate one. From friends, I heard updates about Scott, who seemed to be turning his life around by finding meaningful employment and learning from his past errors. Knowing that he was also making positive changes brought me a sense of calm, realizing that both of us were advancing and maturing in our ways. My father's vision became a catalyst for growth, not just for my mom and me, but for every guest who visited the villa. It turned into a hub of joy and celebration, a sanctuary where people could forge lasting memories. The success of the villa stands as a tribute to my father's vision, embodying the values of resilience and diligent work. Through this endeavor, we've created much more than just a place to stay. The villa has become a beacon of happiness, a place for crafting memories, and a testament to the idea that dreaming big and working hard can lead to remarkable outcomes.
I never imagined that my life would radically change in such a short amount of time. During the course of 17 years, I was under the impression that I had everything under control. A devoted husband, a stunning daughter, and a marriage that I felt to be unbreakable. This is the story of how I came to understand that sometimes the ones who are closest to us can become strangers overnight. My name is Paloma, and this is the telling of the story. The routine that I followed in my life at the time was really pleasant. I was employed as an accountant at a trade company, where I was responsible for balancing books and calculating figures. In spite of the fact that it was not the most fascinating job, I was competent at it, and it was helpful in providing for our family. The fact that my husband, Mark, worked as a sales representative for a huge company meant that he had to travel frequently for business. Over the course of those years, I had become accustomed to his absences, and I even looked forward to his homecoming, since I would prepare all of his favorite meals by myself. Sarah, our daughter, was 15 years old and a brilliant adolescent who brought a lot of vitality into our home. To put it another way, she was the ideal combination of both of us, Mark's charisma and my doggedness. I believed that we were content with our housing situation, which was a small but nice flat. When I look back on it now, I realize how naive I was to believe that happiness could exist for an infinite amount of time. At what time are you going to return this time? The question was posed to Mark over the phone while he was away on a business trip. We were having a talk that we had had a great number of times previously. Should be home by Thursday, he responded, his tone detached from the conversation. Don't bother preparing anything that's in particular. All along, that ought to have been my first clue. My cooking was something that Mark had always enjoyed, especially after he had been abroad. All of that has altered, however, in recent times. Upon his return from his travels, he would be noticeably different. He would be distracted, introspective, and almost icy. He would hardly acknowledge the food that I had cooked when he would enter through the door, as opposed to the warm embraces that I had become accustomed to receiving. "Are you feeling okay?" I'd ask him over and over again. "You give off a different vibe." Instead of addressing my issues, he would respond, "I'm just exhausted from work. It's nothing at all." A midlife crisis was the reason I gave for it. Surely that was the topic that everyone was talking about. At the age of 40, men are going through a period of transition. If I simply gave him some time and space, I was able to persuade myself that it was only a temporary situation and that things will go back to normal. Sarah was also aware of it, but we both chose to remain silent in the hope that it would go away. She said to me one evening, while we were cleaning the dishes together, that her father had been acting strangely as of late. What I said in response was, "He's just stressed out with work, honey," and I believed my own lies. When it comes to marriage, these things do occur occasionally. We'll get better in time. I concentrated on fulfilling the role of the ideal wife, believing that if I simply exerted more effort, by preparing more delicious meals and maintaining a more organized home, everything would return to its previous state. But when we least expect it, life has a way of destroying our illusions and revealing the truth. I can still vividly recall that typical Tuesday evening when everything completely shifted. Since I had just returned home from work, I was sitting on the couch in our living room, checking the messages that I had received on various social media platforms. Suddenly, I was confronted with a message from an unknown sender. I was on the verge of ignoring it, but in the end, I decided to open it. It was written in the message, "Hello, Paloma. I believe it is about time that we had a conversation. I am the second female spouse of your husband." During the course of my reading, my hands began to shake. There was a feeling that each word was like a knife cutting deeper into my heart. "I've been seeing Mark for 3 years now," the message continued. We have a beautiful son together, the child he always wanted. I'm young, beautiful, and I make him happy in ways you never could. I felt sick to my stomach, but I couldn't stop reading. Then came the screenshots, dozens of them. Messages between my husband and this woman revealed the ugly truth about his feelings for me. I can't stand looking at her anymore, Mark had written. She's gotten so fat and ugly. Being in bed with her is like sleeping next to a log. Tears blurred my vision as I scrolled through more messages. Her cooking makes me want to vomit. The whole house feels suffocating. If it wasn't for Sarah, I would have left years ago. The final message from this woman felt like the ultimate slap in the face. If you have any pride left, Paloma, you'll let him go. He doesn't love you anymore. He hasn't for a long time. The room started spinning. I remember trying to stand up, but my legs wouldn't support me. The last thing I heard was my phone clattering to the floor before everything went black. I woke up to Sarah's worried face hovering over me. I was lying on the living room floor where I had collapsed. Mom, can you hear me? Sarah's voice sounded distant. I'm calling an ambulance. No, honey, I'm fine, I tried to say, but the words came out slurred. The paramedics came anyway. They checked my vitals while I sat on our living room couch, Sarah clutching my hand. That's when Mark walked in. What happened? He asked. For a moment, I saw concern in his eyes. Then he saw my phone on the coffee table, still open to those messages. Is it true? I whispered, looking into his eyes. All of it? He didn't even try to deny it. His face hardened, and in that moment, I saw the stranger he'd become. Yes, he said flatly. I don't love you anymore, Paloma. I haven't for a long time. I want a divorce. Sarah gasped beside me, her grip on my hand tightening. The paramedics tactfully stepped into the kitchen, giving us space. How could you do this to Mom? Sarah's voice shook with anger. How could you? I'm sorry you had to find out this way, was all he said before walking out of the room. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I filed for divorce, going through the motions like a zombie. Sarah was my rock through it all, choosing to stay with me despite Mark's attempts to convince her otherwise. He agreed to pay alimony for her without argument, probably the only decent thing he did during that time. Time moved forward, as it always does. Before I knew it, Sarah was graduating from high school. Mark and I split the costs of her college education equally. It seemed like the only civil interaction we had left. We both wanted the best for our daughter, even if we couldn't stand being in the same room together. Sarah chose a college in another city, and at first, everything seemed fine. She called me regularly, telling me about her classes, her new friends, and life in the dorms. I lived for those calls, clinging to each detail she shared about her new life. But gradually, the calls became less frequent. When I tried reaching out, I'd get short, clipped responses. Sorry, Mom, I'm busy right now. Can't talk. Got a study group. Maybe next week, okay. Each excuse felt like a small punch to the gut, but I told myself she was just busy with college life, until she stopped coming home altogether. Why don't you visit anymore, sweetie? I'd ask during our increasingly rare phone conversations. Just swamped with schoolwork, Mom. You know how it is. One evening, feeling particularly lonely, I decided to check her social media page. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just typical college posts about classes and friends. Then I saw it. Among her friends list was a familiar face, Mark's wife, the woman who had destroyed my marriage. My hand shaking, I clicked on her profile. What I saw made my blood run cold. There were dozens of photos of Sarah with Mark, his wife, and their son. Happy family photos. Finally reunited, Raid one caption. Complete family time, said another. In every picture, Sarah was beaming, hugging her father and his new wife like they were one big happy family. I felt sick. All those excuses, all those missed visits. She'd been with them the whole time. I took screenshots of the photos and sent them to Sarah with trembling fingers. Then I called her, my heart pounding. She answered on the third ring. Before I could say anything, she cut me off. I was wondering when you'd find out, she said, her voice cold and unfamiliar. Why, Sarah? Why didn't you tell me? Because they're fun, Mom. They're rich and interesting. Dad and Lisa take me shopping, buy me designer clothes. He just got me a new car for my birthday. What do you offer? A boring apartment and your boring life. Each word felt like a slap. I'm your mother, Sarah. I raised you. Yeah, well, I'm old enough to choose who I want to spend time with, she interrupted. Lisa gives me money whenever I need it. They take me on vacations. If you don't like it, that's your problem. I sat there in my quiet apartment, staring at my phone through tears. First Mark, now Sarah. The two people I loved most in the world had both chosen the younger, prettier, richer woman over me. I curled up on my couch and sobbed, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. I desperately needed someone to talk to. That's when I remembered my father. We hadn't spoken in 15 years, not since that terrible fight about Mark. Dad had seen right through him, had warned me repeatedly, but I wouldn't listen. He's not right for you, Paloma, Dad had said back then. There's something off about him. You just don't want me to be happy, I had shouted back. You've never supported my choices. Those were the last words we'd exchanged before I stormed out of his house, choosing Mark over my father. Now the irony of it all made me laugh bitterly. Dad had been right all along. With trembling fingers, I dialed his number, half expecting it to be disconnected after all these years. Hello. His voice hadn't changed at all. Dad, my voice cracked. It's Paloma. I was wondering if we could talk. Come over right now, he said without hesitation. I'll text you the gate code. Gate code? I wondered as I drove to my childhood home. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found. The modest house I grew up in had been transformed into a stunning estate. A security gate guarded the entrance, and the house itself had been completely renovated, at least triple its original size. Dad was waiting at the door, his hair grayer than I remembered, but his eyes just as kind. Welcome home, sweetheart. Dad, what? How? I gestured at the house. He grinned proudly. A lot can happen in 15 years. Come inside. I'll explain everything over coffee. In what used to be our simple kitchen, now a gourmet masterpiece, Dad told me how he'd built a real estate empire from scratch. I own about 30 properties in the city now, he said casually, both residential and commercial. Turns out your old man had a knack for business after all. Then it was my turn. I told him everything about Mark's betrayal, his new wife and son, and finally about Sarah's rejection. By the end, I was sobbing in his arms like a little girl. I'm so sorry, Dad, I whispered. You were right about Mark. I should have listened. I forgave you long ago, sweetheart, he said, stroking my hair. I'm just glad you're home now. After that day, I started visiting Dad regularly. It felt like making up for lost time. We talked about everything, his business, my life, our shared regrets. One evening, as we sat on his terrace overlooking the city, he made an unexpected proposal. Come work for me, he said. I need a good accountant for my company, someone I can trust, someone who can learn the business from the ground up. Dad, I don't know anything about real estate. I'll teach you. You're smart, Paloma. You always have been. And maybe. He paused. Maybe it'll help take your mind off everything else. He was right. Learning the real estate business was exactly what I needed. Dad started teaching me everything: property valuation, contract negotiations, market analysis. For the first time in years, I felt truly excited about something. The numbers made sense to me, and the business strategies challenged my mind in ways my old accounting job never had. 3 years passed quickly as I immersed myself in learning the real estate business. I still checked Sarah's social media occasionally. That's how I learned she was graduating from college. There was no invitation for me to attend the ceremony. Instead, I received a brief message. Don't come to graduation. Lisa says it would make her uncomfortable. The words stung, but they no longer surprised me. My daughter had made her choice clear. She wanted her father's new family, not me. The photos from her graduation showed her beaming between Mark and Lisa, her half-brother perched on Mark's shoulders. The perfect family portrait, complete without me. One evening, Dad invited me over for dinner. Something felt different. He was quieter than usual, more serious. After we finished eating, he led me to his study. "Sit down, sweetheart," he said, lowering himself carefully into his leather chair. "There's something I need to tell you." My heart clenched at his tone. "What is it, Dad?" "I've been sick for a while now," he said quietly. "Cancer. I've been fighting it for 3 years," but he shook his head slowly. "The doctors say I don't have much time left." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I had work to do," he smiled sadly. "I needed to prepare you to take over the business. That's why I brought you in when I did. I knew I needed time to teach you everything." I fell to my knees beside his chair, grabbing his hand. "Dad, no." "Hey now," he squeezed my hand. "Don't cry, sweetheart. We got these last 3 years together. We made peace. That's all I wanted, to know you were ready, to know we'd made things right between us. Now I can go peacefully." He was gone 3 months later. I arranged the funeral myself, trying to honor him as best I could through my grief. I sent Sarah a message. "Your grandfather passed away. The funeral is on Saturday. Please come." Her response came quickly and hit like a slap. Why would I care about some old man? Dad says he was nasty anyway. Not interested. I stared at the message in disbelief. The man she was dismissing had been ready to welcome her back into his life, despite her treatment of me. He had asked about her often, kept a photo of her on his desk, and now she couldn't even show basic human respect for his passing. The funeral was beautiful, attended by many of Dad's business associates and friends. Sarah's absence felt like a physical wound, but I stood tall, delivering the eulogy with all the strength I could muster. Afterward came the inheritance. The house I'd grown up in, now a mansion. The company I'd learned to run, and all the properties Dad had accumulated over the years. His legacy passed down to me. Everything. Mark and Lisa flaunted their wealth, but it looked small in comparison. Yet I didn't want the mansion. Instead, I asked my assistant at the company to add it to our rental properties portfolio. I stayed in my apartment. I'd had it renovated exactly how I liked it, and it felt like home. My neighbors had become friends over the years, and the location was perfect for overseeing the business. 2 years passed quietly. The business thrived under my management, though my personal life remained empty of the one person I missed most. Then out of nowhere, my phone rang with Sarah's number on the screen. "Mom," she said without any greeting, "I'm getting married. We'll come by next week to talk about it. Jape wants to meet you." True to her word, Sarah arrived at my apartment the following week with her fiancé. I watched as she entered, her eyes scanning my living room with barely concealed disdain. "Still the same old place," she muttered, running a finger along my coffee table. "Still living in dullness and poverty, I see." I bit my tongue, focusing instead on Jake, who seemed uncomfortable with her comment. I busied myself preparing coffee and setting out the pastries I'd bought for their visit. "So," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "tell me about the wedding plans." Sarah straightened up, suddenly animated. "We're planning something spectacular. Only the absolute best venues in the city will do. The ceremony will be in 6 months." "That's wonderful. Have you found a place yet?" "We're looking," Jake said politely. "We want something really special." Sarah cleared her throat. "Actually, Mom, that's partly why we're here. Weddings are expensive, you know." Of course, I nodded. "I'd be happy to help. I can contribute $10,000. Sarah rolled her eyes dramatically. "Well, I guess that's better than nothing. Lisa's already promised to handle my dress and the honeymoon." They didn't stay long after that. As the door closed behind them, I sank onto my couch, thinking about the irony of it all. With the success of Dad's, now my company, I could easily finance 10 such weddings without blinking an eye. But Sarah's attitude, her constant digs about my poverty, her complete lack of interest in my life, it all held me back. "Let's see how this plays out," I murmured to myself. I waited for a wedding invitation, checking my mail every day. Nothing came. Finally, curiosity got the better of me, and I visited Sarah's social media page. There it was, a lengthy post about her perfect wedding venue. My eyes widened as I read the name of the ceremony hall she'd chosen, the Grand Plaza, one of the most prestigious event venues in the city, also one of my properties. Finally, her post read, "Jake and I found the most amazing venue for our wedding. The Grand Plaza is absolutely perfect, so elegant and exclusive. Just need to sign the rental agreement, and everything will be set." I couldn't help but smile. Sarah had no idea that her poor mother owned the very hall she was so excited about. She'd chosen it precisely because it represented everything she thought I couldn't provide: luxury, elegance, wealth. A week after Sarah's visit with Jake, she showed up at my apartment alone. Her expression was cold, practiced. "Mom," she began. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Mom, I need to tell you something," she said, standing in my living room, not bothering to sit down. "I won't be inviting you to the wedding." I felt my heart crack but kept my face neutral. Why not? "Look around." She gestured dismissively at my apartment. "The wedding will be at this gorgeous hall. Important people will be there: Jake's family, Dad's business associates, Lisa's friends. You." She looked me up and down. "You're too simple, too poor. You wouldn't fit in." The cruelty of her words took my breath away. "But hey," she added, heading for the door, "you can still send a gift. Money would be best. I'll text you my card details." The door clicked shut behind her. The Grand Plaza revelation. I sat there for a long moment, then picked up my phone and made a call to my office. A week later, I walked into the Grand Plaza's executive office, where Sarah, Jake, and his parents were sitting with my property manager, ready to sign the rental agreement. Sarah was beaming, practically glowing with satisfaction, until she saw me walk in. "Mom." Her jaw dropped. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, settling into the leather chair behind the desk. The Grand Plaza belongs to me, along with several other luxury venues in the city. In fact, I gestured around us. This entire company that manages these properties is mine. Sarah started stuttering. But how? Where did you get all this?" "Remember when I told you your grandfather had died? When I invited you to his funeral? I kept my voice level. The one you call some nasty old man. He left me everything. His company, his properties, his legacy. Sarah's face went from pale to red. Then, like flipping a switch, her expression changed to one I recognized. The same calculating look she'd worn when choosing between me and Lisa years ago. Wait, if you own all this, then I'm your only heir. You have to give me the venue for free. And a wedding gift, maybe one of your properties. I couldn't help but laugh. Actually, I came here personally to deny your rental application. What? Sarah jumped to her feet. You can't do that. I can, and I am. I stood up, gathering my papers. I suggest you find another venue. And Sarah, I paused at the door, maybe think about whether it's worth destroying relationships with people who truly love you just because they don't seem rich or important enough. But Mom. Sarah's screams followed me down the hallway. I kept walking, my heels clicking against the marble floor, drowning out her protests. For the first time in years, I felt truly strong, not because of my wealth or position, but because I'd finally stood up for myself. The apology. 3 days after my confrontation with Sarah at the Grand Plaza, a gold-embossed envelope arrived in my mail. Inside was an elaborate wedding invitation, the kind that probably cost more than most people's weekly salary. My phone buzzed with a message almost simultaneously. Mom, I'm so sorry for everything. Sarah's message read, I've been horrible to you. I've done a lot of thinking, and I realize now how wrong I was. I'm ready to cut ties with Dad and Lisa completely. We don't need them in our lives. Please come to my wedding. Please give me another chance. I sat on my couch, holding the invitation in one hand and my phone in the other, feeling an odd sense of déjà vu. The words were perfect. The apology seemed heartfelt, but something felt off. Then it hit me, this wasn't really about me at all. When I chose your father and Lisa, I typed back slowly. It was because they seemed to offer something better than what I had with my dad. More money, more excitement, more status. I abandoned someone who truly loved me for superficial things. Sound familiar? I waited, watching the 3 dots appear and disappear several times before her response came through. That's not fair, Mom. I really want to make things right. But I could see it clearly now. When Mark and Lisa had money and status, Sarah had chosen them. Now that she knew I was wealthy, she was choosing me. The pattern was painfully obvious. I didn't respond to her message. Instead, I placed the wedding invitation in my desk drawer next to the photo of my father. Taking steps forward. The wedding date arrived and then expired. The day was spent working in my office, where I had a view over the city that my father had constructed and that I was now in charge of managing. Online, Sarah uploaded a large number of photographs. Despite the fact that it was not quite as prominent as the Grand Plaza, she had discovered another venue. Her grin appeared to be forced, despite the fact that she looked stunning in her white outfit. At times, I continued to check her social media accounts, observing the events that transpire in her life from a distance. These days, she doesn't upload nearly as many images of herself with Mark and Lisa. I assume that the luster of that connection has also begun to evaporate. She still sends me messages on sometimes, and most of the time it is when she is in need of something. But I have learned to ignore them and let them go unanswered. I have not given up hope that we can settle our differences. When all is said and done, it took me 15 years to comprehend what I had done to my father, to fully regret the fact that I had prioritized superficial things over genuine affection. Over the course of all those years, my father waited patiently, ready to greet me upon my return when I finally comprehended. It's possible that's my job right now, to wait. In the event that Sarah ever comes to fully comprehend the distinction between loving someone for who they are and loving them for what they can provide for you, it is important to be prepared. I will continue to run the business that my father left me, continue to live in my decent but modest apartment, and continue to leave the door open for the day when Sarah might come back. This is not because I am wealthy or poor. Rather, it is because I am Sarah's mother.